Okay, hello everyone. My name is Jonathan Goodacre, and I am a white male in late middle age, losing my hair, but normally it is light brown, and I'm wearing a white jumper. For some reason, my camera also tends to make my face a bit redder than it really is, but here we are, and welcome to this session about outdoor arts. It's normally tea breaks are normally done by Oliver Mantell, who runs he's like our head of insight and research, and he works around the cultural participation monitor. But we decided to mix things up a little bit and do something different, and we decided to have a go at looking at outdoor arts audiences, which is something we've worked on over a period of years. So I'm going to give a few thoughts around this, and then we also have Shibata from Outdoor Arts UK, who is going to give what we call a response to this, and basically contribute a few thoughts. Then we'll open it up to the floor for people to make comments. And we've also got one or two other people here who are related to the work we're doing, and I'm sure it'd be great for them to contribute. For example, Kevin Ratton from Global Streets, one of the projects we've worked on as evaluators for a long time, and some other people have worked on some other projects we've done. So, we're going to be looking at what the data says about outdoor arts. We're going to look at the sorts of work we've done on outdoor arts over a period of time. In fact, the original title of this was 10 Years of Outdoor Arts, but actually, when I was looking back at it, goes back, a lot of our work goes back to 2013. So, in fact, it's 12 years at least of that. So, we're going to have a look at a few aspects of that research and data and what it says. And then we can kind of move into what that might say about the consequences of what we're doing. And that's very much where Show will come in and kind of make some comments around that. So, the interesting case of outdoor arts, and in fact, when I joined the audience agency, end of 2012 as we into 2013, it was one of the first things we wanted to look at actually, because outdoor arts is a very fascinating part of the cultural sector, especially in terms of its audiences. As we'll see, it has got a very particular, is something very particular about outdoor arts, and we will have a look at this from a UK perspective mainly. I do quite a lot of work internationally these days, and for example, this is from a few years ago. This is from the Imaginarius Festival, which many of you will know from Portugal. And this, in fact, was a promenade performance in a wood, which was in Spanish and Portuguese, but really quite fascinating. I've always remembered it, and quite nicely encapsulates what is interesting about outdoor arts. So, what are we talking about? So, Outdoor Arts UK, as many of you know, is the lead sector lead on this, and this is their definition. So, yeah, their definition is maybe not quite the right word. This is their kind of view of what outdoor arts is, and in fact, it does cover quite a wide range of activities, usually around performance, although actually here we are looking at visual arts, sound art, live art as well to some degree. But obviously, as the name suggests, outside outside venues, usually in public spaces, and presented in lots of different ways, sometimes as parts of festivals, sometimes as standalone events, sometimes long, sometimes short, sometimes more spectacle based, sometimes more street arts based, and usually kind of free to access for audiences, but not always the case, but that's mainly the case around that. So let's go straight into one of the issues around outdoor arts, which is that sometimes research can be quite difficult to create data around. This is partly because we don't tend to have much ticketing data, which, you know, at the audience agency we make quite a lot of use of. because events tend to be free and the kind of people can just turn up and enjoy them. They're also, by the nature of their events, they are events where people come in, go out, wander around, move from one event to another, which can make surveying difficult. The performances are sometimes short. They can be sometimes like a little bit unpredictable, and they take place in different locations. So if you compare it to doing questionnaires, for example, in a theatre, let's say, at least using a theatre, although there are difficulties around that as well. In a theatre, people leave through the same exit, basically entrances, so you can talk to people face to face through that. And also very often venues will have a good mailing list, which can also be used for e-surveys afterwards, which we don't have in the outdoor arts. Weather can have an influence, and also one of the things we often found is that, of course, many events take place at night. When we're working with professional field workers, that can sometimes be quite difficult, doing stuff out in the dark while things are taking place, and often finish quite late as well. And people are there to enjoy themselves rather than answer questions. Very early on in the process of the research, the Outdoor Arts UK, or ISAN as it was then, and people involved in it were very clear that we should avoid either doing or recommending people ask people questions while performances are taking place. This is in a way obvious. I mean, you would never do it in a theatre when the performance is on stage, but outdoor arts, of course, people are outside, and like us mentioning, they might be wandering from one place to another. Sometimes there are some ways around that, ways which are different. I mean, for example, if they are long promenade performances, parades, that sort of thing. But it does mean that sometimes, and I know there are people on this call who will tell me this, that it can be sometimes quite difficult to get the required number of questionnaires to have a low margin of error, and also to have more sophisticated questionnaires rather than short ones. So here's a slightly different starting point. The Cultural Participation Monitor is a regular countrywide, UK-wide survey of the public, and we do it as a sample, and we do it regularly. It's not necessarily attached to events. It's a sample of the public. It's quite useful, and many of you who are regulars of the tea breaks will know that we draw a lot of our work and insight from the Cultural Participation Monitor, which, by the way, started as a project about understanding pandemic audiences in 2020, but has continued as a very useful thing. So the Cultural Participation Monitor enables us to see things from a larger scale perspective. Now, one of the things about that is that, as we know, sometimes people say they do things which are not necessarily, with tickets, we know someone's in a place, or a questionnaire of people at an event. So this is what people say they do. But just out of interest, looking at the overall sets of art forms across the country, the other outdoor festival, carnival, or street arts category, around about 22% of the population say they do that. Earlier, I thought I'd try and work out how many people that really is, but that's quite a complicated equation. But you might want to look at that if you are ever making the case to people about the number of people involved in outdoor arts. You can see it's about halfway down the list, in a sense. It's not the most attended, but it's there is quite important. And just out of interest, to compare the data, this is also the DCMS participation survey, so compared with CPM Wave 11, which was last year, almost identical a result. And when we're looking at research, when you get a result that looks so close like that, that seems to be a good guidance of what we're talking about. So we're really thinking about just over a fifth of the population have been to, and say they have been to, an outdoor arts event in the last year. And out of interest, we know across the UK, yeah, across the UK, this is where outdoor arts attenders say they are. Perhaps without any surprise, we've got quite high concentration in London. There's quite a lot that happens in London, but quite interesting ones across the whole country. We can see there West Midlands, Northwest are high, East of England with lots that's fed Southwest. And as well in Wales and Scotland, we've been doing some work in Wales recently with some outdoor arts events there. That was now, let's go back in time. Let's turn back the clock to time before the audience agency, I suppose. There were other organisations like Audiences London and Arts About Manchester and all those sorts of organisations in the past. But 2013, okay, so this is my interpretation of what the situation was then. Outdoor arts was not usually well funded, at least by national arts funders, if I can put it like that. Often it was funded by local arts authorities, it still is, of course, very importantly. It was sometimes thought as not having high artistic quality. Arts organisations, however, were producing and presenting a wide range of work. Attendances were reportedly quite high, not absolutely sure it was, and not clear entirely why people attended. It seemed that audiences were more diverse and representative of the population, but there wasn't necessarily good, robust, reliable research to show any of this to be true. So what happened was, at this point, the audience agency collaborated with what was then ISAN, you may remember, and I'm going to forget what that stands for now, Independent Street Arts Network, that's what it was. Became Outdoor Arts UK, to also partly an interesting shift in attention there. And with them, we worked with around 35 plus organisations in the outdoor arts, including working with some important collaborators on that. So I saw that we have someone from Extracts who are kind of working on the Without Walls project at that time. Without Walls was very important, and several other projects at that time too. What we did was we devised some questionnaires which actually took a while to develop because we were too ambitious to begin with about what we could have in a questionnaire. But the questionnaires were devised for delivery face-to-face and by post-event e-survey. And between 2013 and 2016, 2014, around about 3 to 4 years, we had 30,000 respondents to these questionnaires. And actually, I was just talking to Sho just before the session, and he said he was actually at one of our early presentations in, I think, 2017, around that. So he might say something about that later as well. When he wasn't working for Outdoor Arts UK at that time, was working for someone else. So what we were able to do at that time was to compare the data with secondary data of the population and using the postcodes particularly to look at the profiles of the attenders using audience spectrum. I'm not going to go into the whole process of explaining audience spectrum because most of you know this, but very briefly, by the way, this is the old terminology. We've changed the terminologies now, but still 10 categories. And this very, very loosely goes from left to right in terms of high engaged to low engaged. Now, this graph may not look very spectacular, but it's actually incredibly important because what it shows is that the audiences for outdoor arts is very similar, representative, one might say, of the population as a whole. Later on in the presentation, I'll show you why that's unusual, because it is unusual. It's unusual in the arts. It shows that, it's not quite matching, but you can see that across the whole population, across the whole audience spectrum profile, it is very similar. What else did the research show? Well, large audiences overall. I'm not sure we ever did a very good count of this, but I know that other sector support organisations and other kind of clusters of organisations have done their own audience counts, which show that overall the audiences are high. And like we said, at least a fifth of the population say they've been to an outdoor arts event in the last year. It showed that the audience was diverse and representative of the population. That's partly what that audience spectrum graph shows. Many of those outdoor arts attenders were not normally engaging with arts and culture, and this carries right through. And I haven't got a lot of the data in today's presentation, but of course, many creative people and places projects do outdoor arts, and they are often part of projects, not least in Global Streets. Actually, many of Global Streets hosts are creative people and places. And what that tends to mean is the people who attend are often not normally engaging with arts and culture. I was looking at a couple of projects last summer where it was the only thing they've been to that year was attending an outdoor arts event at the festival, quite high proportion. That diversity is also reflected in ethnic diversity. Very often outdoor arts was valued for its connection with place and community. I'll come to that in a moment. And the quality of performances and the experience of it was rated highly. And this comes through quite consistently. It's variable, of course, from place to place, but it's quite consistent. We also, it's quite difficult to do more qualitative research around this, but one of my favorite things is when you ask people what 3 words describe their experience, you can use a word cloud to look at what sort of words come up. And this, by the way, is probably not much of a surprise, but the word fun often comes through on outdoor arts. So it doesn't come through on all arts events, by the way. People often say to me, well, aren't these all the same? They're not all the same. They're very different around the different sectors and different experiences. And this is the one from the outdoor arts sector way back then. So let's go straight to one of the key questions: why does outdoor arts appeal? What does the research show? It shows that it appeals because it's often a different kind of space. It's not in a conventional venue. For many people, conventional venues are a barrier to attendance. They don't see it as for them. They see them as elitist or clubby or not for them. Often the performances are not sort of non-verbal or physical and spectacular. That's not always the case, of course, but there's a lot of that as part of people being able to kind of engage directly with that work immediately. They are usually free to attend, although we know that's not always cited as a primary reason for going. There are other reasons. People are motivated to go anyway. Sometimes they're interactive and participatory. That not always, but there's some people quite like the engagement that many of them have, especially around some of those more street arts ones. They're fascinating, surprising, unexpected. People love the fact that you kind of go into a street and suddenly it's you got something different from what's there normally from the shopping centre, whatever. The social and community experience is important to enjoyment, and that seems to be a key thing that we see that in lots of arts audiences, but this is very particular to outdoor arts. I would say, this is my own interpretations, not necessarily coming from the research, but often the promotional communication in the outdoor arts sector is what I would say is unpretentious. It's simple and direct and tells you what you're going to have, what you enjoy about it. We know also, and this is where Outdoor Arts UK and other organisations have been so important, because the programming is knowledgeable and people work together. So they often collaborate about what's happening. People go abroad to find work and they bring it back. Very important aspect of it, which means that there's always a constantly shifting and changing programme of work. And of course, many organisations are doing good proactive audience development. But just throw in this was asked about what their reason for attending is. This is one where you can, so there are 2 different ways of asking this question. This is one where you ask people any of the different things and look at those top two: to be entertained and to spend time with friends and family. So we know this was the report that we actually brought out in 2018. It is still up on our website if you want to go and have a look at it. In fact, I'll show you the link at the end of it. We titled it as Fun with Friends because of that thing about the fun, the engaging aspect of it, but also doing something socially that very often we see, and this carries through right to now, that people are, they engage as parts of groups, either adult groups or family groups, in those things. That's part of it. And then also not just with the groups they come with, there's also an element of meeting other people, the community aspect. And see that quotation at the bottom. There is an element of the unknown to this performance that created quite a talking point, a quote from the audience. That goes back to that point I was saying about about that unexpected surprise element to the work. This is one or two things here. I'm not going to just to point to that one in the middle, local. That local thing is quite interesting. I haven't got a lot of material on that today, but the local, by that means that very often the audiences come from very short distance to the place where it takes place. We're talking about often within 5 miles. Whereas most, if you look across other art forms, it can be much higher, 20 miles and more, 20-minute drive time, so to speak. And this has implications. It has implications for the social, the community, and place making. Let's have a look at that. So the importance of the social and community experience is really nice. This is, I think this photograph, which I took when I was at the Hull Freedom Festival, shows that sort of aspect very nicely, because you are in a space with other people, you can see the other people, you're with people. When people laugh, you laugh, and also it's just kind of a friendly part of being in that city. Really nicely done. This was the parkour performance that was done there, and I've got other ones of them kind of tumbling off the top, but we won't go there now. There is a theory which I often espouse, which is that one of the reasons that people like outdoor arts is because you can leave when you want to. Now, many people have pointed out to me, you can always leave when you want to. But what I mean by that is that at outdoor arts performances, you can come in and come out, and there's a lower barrier to exit and entrance and exit. Which, if you think about the comparator with, say, going to a theatre performance, very often that if you were to leave after 5 minutes, say, that would be making a statement about you don't like it. And the outdoor arts, you often have this feeling that you can feel freer to be in it or not in it. And often you kind of wander along and see it, which I think is one of the reasons why you often get a much more representative representative audience. By the way, that's the Galway Community Circus performance of Lifeline, I think it was called Lifeline, and where they had this fantastic wire walking, that's the word, across the main river in Galway. Another time I'll tell you why that's significant, but not now. Right, okay, I'm very pleased to kind of have permission to show some of the work we've done with Global Streets. Global Streets, 10 years plus of international outdoor arts events, 12 arts organisations across the country, led by Greenwich and Docklands International Festival, festival.org, in fact. And we've been working as the evaluator of this for all that time. And one of the things that Global Streets does brilliantly is these lovely infographics of the statistics and the work that's shown. You can see their report another time. The statistics are taken from different sources, but quite a lot of them come from work we've done. Just going to point out 3 of these, which I think are interesting. 76% of audiences say that Global Streets events give them pride in their local area. Very important aspect. 8% say Global Streets events change their view of how British high streets and public spaces can unite people. Those two are very similar. And then this one, if I can just move this across, 67% say that Global Streets events help them to feel connected to other people in the area. These come from fairly simple impact questions. Here they are, which we ask consistently. And by the way, one of the good things about working on this project over a period of time is that year on year we can ask the same questions, and we can see the robustness, we can see the comparisons. Things change between places and years, but we can see here a couple of very important things. By the way, it encouraged me to look out for other events like this in the future. I would say is an important audience development objective as well. These are strongly agree and agree. You can see how they vary across those different things. Here is this. Here is that. It gave me a sense of pride in wherever. Um, Quite because it relates back to community. It relates back to the fact that these take place in public spaces. It helps people to think, "Oh my God, I'm in the middle of Bradford." And now I see Bradford in a different way, and and it shows me that Bradford is a place that has these amazing events, is to some degree representative of Bradford, and is something that we can say, hey, this is something special about our place. I'm just using Bradford because we did some work with them over the summer on a couple of their projects, so it's fresh in my mind. And this is from Global Streets. Going back to Global Streets, it gave me a sense of it's the same data actually, but as a graphical format. And we can think about why that is. I won't go into this in depth now, but very often, like I said, they're in places which can be examined. They can be seen in a different sort of way. It's not, there are many of the outdoor arts events use city centres, use public spaces in a very interesting way, which can be said to be reinterpreting them. And this, for example, is a project from way back, I think 2013, which was a Roald Dahl celebration in Cardiff, for example, which kind of uses the spaces there to describe to show that area in a different way. Let's go to now because we're running out of time. This is the recent cultural participation monitor data that from what I showed you to begin with. I show this to show that it continues to show that the outdoor arts audiences are representative of the population as a whole, more or less. It's slightly tricky this because the data is slightly weighted, so there's a tendency for it to be a little bit more representative. But nevertheless, if I compared it to other art forms, or this is comparing outdoor arts trends with the audience answer overview overall, cluster. Audience answers is the blue on the right hand side of the graphs, and the outdoor arts on the left. You can see that if you look towards the right, the low engaged ones, there are higher people from the low engaged groups than in audience answers generally. Audience answers is the overall entire UK sector-wide data set of all those people. And we can do some other kind of interpretations. This is outdoor arts versus classical music, for example. Maybe not a big surprise, but just worth mentioning that point that outdoor arts has a wider, more diverse and representative group of people than classical music. I can show you other ones as well, but classical music is quite a good one. Just a couple of just reminders of the profiles in general. Now, this is again from CPM, the current wave of attenders. And I haven't mentioned this, but there is a kind of interesting thing about outdoor arts which focuses around this 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54 age groups. It is quite wide ranging. This 35 to 44 seems to also correspond a little bit to family audiences and people bringing children, this sort of age of people as well, out of interest. But, wide age range. Not all art forms like this. Not all would have 16% from a 16 to 24 age group, for example. And ethnicity as well, similar to those other statistics, is fairly representative of the background population. Obviously, we know that in relation to ethnicity, this varies quite a lot from location to location. Quite a lot of the outdoor arts events happen in cities where ethnicity tends to be more diverse, so they tend to be more ethnically diverse audiences, but that doesn't necessarily follow, of course. It does in this case. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Sho in a minute. I haven't been able to see I know you've put some questions in the chat, so I'll go and have a look at those in a minute. But I'm going to hand over to Sho now to give a few thoughts about this. Sho Shibata from Outdoor Arts UK.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your presentation. For those of you who may require visual description, I'm an East Asian man in my 40s with round glasses, wearing a black gilet, and I'm sitting in front of a great curtain. And it's a real pleasure to be here. And thanks, Jonathan, for doing all the hard plug of outdoor art sector for us. Taking words out of my mouth, but yeah, I mean, the slides were so great to see in many ways that the sector is really strong in reaching diverse and new audiences. And we are really, really strong also in creating a sense of place, pride, but also economic impact as well. And I just want to give you a statement from Lynn Gardner, who's a critic, theatre critic from the stage. And she wrote a piece in conjunction with this year's Greenwich and Docklands International Festival. And she said, something different happens when you take theatre outside and offer it for free at the point of access. The experience is not diluted, it expands. And in the article, she also writes about the persistent lack of arts access for state school children as the spending power of schools and homes continue to get pushed. And she comments on how these audiences are fast becoming hard to reach, quotation mark, when art happens out of sight in buildings. And I think all of us around this table can agree that arts access is really important for not only for the intrinsic value of artistic work, but also for all the benefits that the arts can bring to people and places. And I suppose one of the points that or questions I have is, could we, all of us in the arts industry, working better together to service the new audiences and those audiences who are missing out from the arts? Perhaps we can be doing more joined up programs to create a pathway for deeper culture participation and for developing cultural literacy. One of the weaknesses, I suppose, we have as a sector is the fact that a lot of our festivals and events are quite one-off or only happens once a year. And there's a big gap through the 12 months of all the other works that's could be happening. And as Jonathan alluded to, a lot of the audiences we reach only engage with cultural services or activities in that period. So for the rest of the year, they quite often don't have anything else to engage with. But they might be living in places where they have theatres, galleries, museums. And perhaps we need to be thinking more strategically for, in terms of place-based way of cultural engagement, to plan our programs a bit better. And there are some good examples that's happening out there. So, for example, Appetite in Stoke is an organisation that organises an outdoor festival called Big Feast every August. And they're actually situated as part of the New Vic Theatre in Stoke. And they recently did a project called Sensation, where New Vic Theatre lent on the fact that Appetite has got really good connection with South Asian communities to address the fact that their lack of those kinds of audiences coming to see indoor theatre work. So they work together to develop a program, an initiative to try and start to address that. And that's starting to change the program on New Vic. Grimsby is another example where the National Heritage Centre for Fishing has worked with Culture House in Grimsby, who organises an outdoor festival every year, to put on a program right on the doorstep of the museum. And that did translate into some new people coming in through the doors. So there are different ways in which indoor and outdoor organisations can work to try and address that kind of barrier or perception of the barrier for new audiences. And I believe that in many ways, for those of us who are funded in England or Scotland, I think that those who are in receipt of public funding have a duty to make program available to the full spectrum of a population. And I think the funders are definitely becoming more data driven. And it won't be long, I think, until they start developing initiatives to delve deeper into audience statistics. So in many ways, now might be the time we need to start working together better. And also, a final point, outdoor arts can also work to help indoor organizations or institutions take their value, mission statements or artistic vision out into the community as well. And there's some examples. National Trust, for example, they have an urban nature program where they actually take the philosophy of National Trust in terms of environmentalism, engagement with heritage, out into public spaces or urban spaces where The National Trust perhaps doesn't have a strong presence. And they work quite closely with many of our artists to help share the vision and philosophy of National Trust. National Theatre's Riverside stage also does something quite similar too. So in many ways, there are already people working in the wider cultural sector who are working quite closely with outdoor arts organizations and producers and festival makers. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. We're here to work with you to start thinking about the diversification for audiences. And I think we can work together much better to start taking the benefits of arts and culture and the joy it brings to all corners of our country. That's it from me. Over back to you, Jonathan, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you. So, opening it up for questions and comments from the floor. If you